film and Benjamin Britten composing the music, you can imagine that the sentimental position that the post office, Royal Mail, had in the hearts of people throughout the United Kingdom. And it was that attachment, the romantic idea of the mail being delivered to your home. And by the way, the only 3 countries in the world where mail is delivered directly to your home are the UK, the Republic of Ireland, and Switzerland. Everywhere else, mail in many, many countries is delivered to a box at the end of the street if you live outside an urban area. Again, they tried to remove that in the south, and that was another campaign I'll tell you about at a future day. And if you ever visit the headquarters of the Communication Workers Union in Dublin, there is a beautiful illuminated scroll. And in that scroll is a British postman shaking hands with an Irish postman, and them both swearing to be brothers forever and a day. And that was because in 22, when Ireland became a separate jurisdiction, the post office had to separate, and the unions had to separate because they were civil servants. But that illuminated scroll hung in the post office union for years. And then another version of it, another beautiful copy of it, was presented to the Irish postal workers by none other than Alan Johnson, who ended up Home Secretary. Because you remember, Alan was a postman. And can you imagine Alan arriving at your door with his big smiley face and a joke for the day? I would say he got quite good Christmas boxes, because postmen lived for their Christmas box. I think that's all probably gone as well. And maybe not. Maybe some people will correct me on that. But that was the feeling about the post office. And then we see Mr. Bates versus the post office. We knew this story was in the background. It had been rumbling on for years. And Mr. Bates versus the post office is one of the most compelling dramas I've ever watched. I had to watch every episode in the same night. I was so struck by it. And I think this was because it was about ordinary folk. It wasn't about wars in other countries, heroic deeds, nothing. It was about ordinary folk, people that all of us knew, or still knew. And yet it was about the greatest miscarriage of justice in British legal history against ordinary people. This is about hundreds of innocent sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses who are wrongly accused of theft, fraud, and false accounting. Many of them, including, I believe, one gentleman that was on television here the other night, here in Northern Ireland, were convicted and sent to jail. And as I said, we think of the post office as cuddly and friendly and run by people like that. We think of Postman Pat and his black and white cat, who I think is Jess. We look at our bright red pillar boxes where we put our mail still and our Christmas cards with a sense of joy and expectation, less today than in the past. And indeed, if you go south of the border, the pillar boxes are green. But if you look closely at them, particularly the ones in Dunleary, where I come from, you will see on them Victoria, VR, Victoria Regina, and GR, George Rex. They're the old post boxes that have been, pillar boxes, that have been there since God's own time. Now painted green, but still the royal insignia on them, indicating royal men. In Leviticus it says, paying employees fairly and on time is important to your faith and your belief. Paying employees fairly and on time. But in this case, instead of paying them, their money was taken away from them. They were accused of theft. Deuteronomy says, in Deuteronomy it says, oppressing someone by denying them a fair wage or not paying them is a sin. That's a word we don't use much now, isn't it? A sin. That old-fashioned word sin, which I think should come back into our vocabulary. Because what happened to these people was sinful. Do not take advantage of a hard worker, it says in Deuteronomy, who is poor and needy, whether the worker is a fellow Israelite or a foreigner resident in one of your own towns. And you think of the post office and the amount of Asian people who always made great sub-postmasters and sub-postmisters. How many of them suffered? Pay them their wages each day before sunset, because they are poor and counting on it. Otherwise, they may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. They didn't, as I said, not only not pay them, but people had to mortgage their houses in order to pay the post office money that they were stealing from them. What is fascinating about this story, of course, is the personality of Alan Bates. In various interviews, Mr. Bates cannot state often enough that he is not extraordinary. He's nothing extraordinary about him, he says. He's an ordinary person, ordinary folk. Maybe he will accept an ordinary man doing an extraordinary thing. He gave 20 years of his life getting justice and hopefully not just compensation, but people will get their money back tenfold for what happened to them. Getting justice for much maligned people, the most ordinary of folk in all of our community. In some cases, as anybody that knows in rural Ireland or rural Northern Ireland or rural UK, that the post office is often the heartbeat of a village or a small hamlet. It's where people go to buy their groceries, they go to get news, they go to here, Mrs. Murphy is. Haven't seen her for a few days. The great thing about sub-postmasters and sub-postmisters is they're always great gossips, so they'll have all the news for you and how everybody is. In Proverbs it says, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is your power to do it. Just think about it. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it. And now as the story rolls out, we learn that the mistakes were known all along, that the Horizon technology, they knew there were serious faults in it. Yet they still humiliated, and not only, as I said, humiliated, but imprisoned people that the rest of us know. Simple, ordinary folk. During the week, I was down in Dublin. I was invited to a lunchtime play called Bullied. And actually, I'm hoping, having spoken to the people in the play, because Vinnie McCabe, one of the actors, is an old friend of mine, to bring it here for one night, and we'll have it performed here. Now, Bullied is different than the story I'm telling you. In the play, Bullied is about a young schoolgirl being bullied on her phone. And she's staying with her granddad. And her granddad spots this. He notices there's something consistently wrong with this young girl and intervenes. But also in the play, there's a lovely little vignette where granddad, his gas is threatened to be cut off because the bill hasn't been paid. And he attempts to phone the gas company, because he doesn't know how to do the laptop and go in through email or whatever, to explain why the gas bill hasn't been paid. And the reason is his wife has died, and the gas bill was in her name. So when he phones up, he gets the usual. Whatever your inquiry, press 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If it's about your bill, press 3, all of that. And then the most horrendous music coming on. And then a voice comes on and asks him, how can they help him? And he says, you're threatening to cut my gas off. And they say, well, number, date of birth, blah, 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 blah. Right, oh yes, the bill hasn't been paid. And he said, that's because Annie, it was in Annie's name, and she's gone. And he can't say, it's too much for him to say his wife is dead. So he said, she's gone. She's gone. And there's a famous graveyard in Dublin called Glasnevin. And the fellow says, well, when she comes home, could you ask her to, because we must only talk to the account holder. And he says, she won't be home. She's in Glasnevin. Well, when she comes home from Glasnevin. So anyway, that's the nature of the conversation. And when he gets nothing from them, at the end of it all, they say, well, have a nice day, and is there anything else we can do for you? And he says, yeah, if you're passing such and such a shop, would you collect the messages for me? And then we've all had that experience. And what we saw in this series, Post Office, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, was what I would call bullying on a massive scale. Those people were bullied. The inspectors that went in and talked to them bullied them into submission, bullied them into even admitting when they didn't take money, saying that they took the money. They were bullied. And we are all bullied today by major corporations when we try to complain. And I believe those who persecuted these people did so because they could. Simple as that. They believed they could get away with it. Now we find, hopefully, that some heads will roll. It was the protection of the brand. Imagine our soft, cuddly Royal Mail, Post Office had come to this. The protection of the brand was the most important outcome. No matter what damage it did to ordinary people, that wasn't the issue. We must protect our brand name above everything else. And we'll sacrifice people who have given loyalty for 20, 30 years for the brand name. They made them poor. In some cases, They made them homeless. It was, as I said, using that old-fashioned word since it died of them, it was sinful what they did. Pay them their wages each day before censoring, says Scripture, because they are poor and they are counting on it. And they made them poor. Otherwise, they may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. I think this is a really timely story. And I think it's time for all of us, not to be bullied by major corporations, no matter who they are, because we are. Happens all the time. They try to confuse you. I'm easy to confuse. And I'm bewildered when I'm trying to talk, even to reinsure my car. When I went along, my car insurance had gone up by 200 or 300. And he told me, it's your age. It's your age. And I said, well, does the 40 years that I've had insurance, do you mean anything? Oh, he said, it's like buying a can of beans. Go where you get it cheapest. Wow. And here I was thinking I mattered. How silly was that? That I mattered. That they cared about it. They sent me a letter. AXA Insurance loves you, cares about you. We adore the ground you walk on. However, that's the world that we live in now. And we really do need to do something about it. And thank God Mr. Bates did. And a big round of applause for Toby Jones. Wasn't he amazing? As I said, and I'll finish on this, because I'm really so angry about this. This is a timely story for us to heed and reinvest in dignity, respect, and humanity. It is a sad concept if we are all to be submissive to corporate greed, and let's call it what it is as well, corporate corruption. Amen.